The cold wind howled through the nearly empty street, but I barely noticed. My fingers danced over my worn guitar strings, the familiar calluses on my fingertips pressing into the metal as I strummed out the last few chords of a song I wrote. The city never slept, but for people like me, people on the fringes, it barely noticed us either. A few crumpled bills and scattered coins rested in my open guitar case, but it wasn't enough for a hot meal, let alone rent. I let out a shaky breath, my stomach twisting with hunger. Just one more song, I told myself. One more, and maybe I'd make enough to buy something warm to eat. Then, I heard it, a sharp, desperate cry from an alleyway across the street. Adrenaline shot through me. Most people would have ignored it. Most people would have walked away. But I wasn't most people. Gripping my guitar by its neck, I rushed toward the sound, my heart hammering in my chest. In the dim glow of the flickering streetlight, I saw them, 3 men, their faces shadowed by hooded sweatshirts, closing in on someone. The victim, a man in an expensive suit, struggled against them, but he was outnumbered. One of them had a knife. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice slicing through the night. I didn't think, I just acted. Swinging my guitar with all my strength, I brought it down on the nearest attacker's back. The force of the impact sent him staggering forward with a grunt of pain. The other 2 turned on me, their eyes glinting with something dark and dangerous. I gritted my teeth, bracing myself. The man in the suit took advantage of the distraction, elbowing one of the attackers hard in the gut and sending him sprawling to the ground. The last one hesitated just long enough for the suited man to land a well-placed punch to his jaw, knocking him out cold. The one I hit scrambled to his feet and took off running, dragging his unconscious friend with him. The third groaned on the pavement before crawling away. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "You okay?" I asked, turning to the man I just helped. He straightened, brushing invisible dust from his pristine suit. I expected him to look shaken, maybe even scared, but instead, he regarded me with an unreadable expression, his sharp blue eyes locking onto mine. "You saved me," he said, his voice smooth but laced with something almost amused. "Yeah, well, guess it's not your night to get mugged," I said, forcing a small, wry smile despite my pounding heart. His gaze flickered to my battered guitar. The wood cracked from where it had connected with one of the muggers. My stomach twisted. I'd had that guitar for years. It was my only lifeline. Before I could process the loss, the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black wallet. He flipped it open, pulled out a crisp bill, and handed it to me. I almost laughed. I didn't do it for money. He tilted his head slightly, studying me as though I were something intriguing and unexpected. "What's your name?" I hesitated. "Mia." He extended his hand. "Elias." I took it, his grip firm and warm. He didn't seem like the kind of man who was easily shaken, but there was something about the way he held himself, composed yet dangerous, that sent a shiver down my spine. "Let me repay you," Elias said. I scoffed. Like I said, I didn't do it for money. He smiled, slow and deliberate. "Then let me help you in another way." I had no idea that one act of kindness would change my life forever. Elias's eyes lingered on me, the sharp intensity in his gaze making my skin prickle. The way he carried himself, so composed, so completely unaffected by what had just happened, made me realize that he was no ordinary man. "I don't need help," I said, slinging my cracked guitar over my shoulder, trying to ignore the dull ache of loss twisting inside me. That guitar had been my lifeline, the one thing that had stayed with me through every high and low. And now, it was barely holding together. Elias smirked, clearly amused by my defiance. "You may not need it, but I'm offering anyway." I narrowed my eyes. "Why?" "Because you stepped in when most people wouldn't. And because I can," he said simply, his voice smooth, as if he was stating an undeniable fact. I exhaled slowly. "Look, if you want to pay me off to clear your conscience, don't bother. I've been taking care of myself for a long time." Elias didn't flinch. "And how's that working out for you?" His words hit harder than I wanted to admit. I clenched my jaw, refusing to let him see how much they stung. "I get by," I muttered. His smirk faded slightly, and for the first time, something unreadable flickered across his features. "Tell me something, Mia. How long have you been playing on the streets?" I hesitated. "A while." "Why?" I let out a dry chuckle. Because it's the only thing I know how to do. Elias studied me for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek business card, holding it between two fingers. Meet me tomorrow. Noon. At this address. I hesitated before taking the card. The name on it made my breath itch. Elias Lancaster. No wonder he looked so composed. Elias Lancaster wasn't just some wealthy guy. He was one of the wealthiest men in the country. A billionaire. I stared at the card, then back at him. Why would someone like you waste your time on someone like me? Elias's lips curled into a smirk. Because I have a feeling you're more than just a street musician. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the dimly lit street, clutching a car that could change everything. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the city buzzing outside my tiny rented room. My fingers instinctively reached for my guitar, only to remember the damage from last night. A lump formed in my throat, but I pushed it down. I pulled out Elias Lancaster's business card from my worn-out jeans pocket, running my fingers over the embossed letters. Meet me at noon. His words echoed in my head. I had no reason to go, no reason to trust a man like him. But something about the way he looked at me last night, the way he spoke as if he already knew I'd show up, made my skin prickle. And maybe, just maybe, I was curious. With nothing left to lose, I threw on my cleanest shirt, tied my hair back, and walked out the door. The address led to a towering skyscraper. I stood on the sidewalk, craning my neck at the massive glass building reflecting the morning sun. The name Lancaster Enterprises was emblazoned in bold letters above the entrance. My stomach twisted. What was I even doing here? Before I could talk myself out of it, I stepped inside. The lobby was sleek, modern, and smelled of polished marble and fresh coffee. Men in expensive suits strode past with purpose, and women in sharp heels clicked across the floor like they belonged there. I, in my scuffed sneakers and faded jeans, did not. A well-dressed receptionist arched a perfectly shaped brow at me. Can I help you? I'm here to see Elias Lancaster. Her expression flickered with surprise, but before she could say anything, a tall man in a tailored suit approached. Miss Mia. I nodded hesitantly. Right this way. Mr. Lancaster is expecting you. I followed him through a maze of hallways and into a sleek elevator. As the floors ticked by, nerves clawed at my chest. The doors finally opened to an office that was less of an office and more of a penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view of the city. And there, standing by the glass with his hands in his pockets, was Elias. You came, he said without turning around. I crossed my arms. I guess I was curious. He finally turned to face me, a slow smirk playing on his lips. Good. Curiosity is the first step to opportunity. I narrow my eyes. So what's the catch? Nobody just hands out opportunities to broke street musicians. Elias walked toward me, stopping just a breath away. Maybe I see something in you. I scoffed. And what exactly do you see? His gaze flickered over me, assessing. A survivor. Someone who doesn't give up, even when the world turns its back. My throat tightened, but I masked it with sarcasm. Wow, that's deep. You should write fortune cookies. Elias chuckled. I like you, Mia. I roll my eyes. Lucky me. His amusement faded slightly, replaced by something more serious. I want to offer you a deal. I stiffened. Here it comes. What kind of deal? Elias walked to his desk and picked up a sleek folder, tossing it onto the table in front of me. I want you to work for me. I blinked. As what? A human jukebox for your office? He smirked. No, as something more. You said music is the only thing you know how to do. So let's do something about that. I frowned, flipping the folder open. My breath hitched. Inside was a contract for a recording deal. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Is this some kind of joke? Elias leaned in, his voice low. I don't joke when it comes to business. This is real. I swallowed hard. Why would you do this for me? His gaze held mine, intense and unwavering. Because you saved my life, and now I want to change yours. I was breathless. Was this really happening? I stared at the contract, my fingers twitching against the edges of the crisp pages. My heart thundered in my chest. This can't be real. Elias Lancaster, a billionaire, a man who had everything, was offering me a deal that could change my life forever. I had spent years struggling on the streets, pouring my soul into music, only to be ignored by the world. And now, In the span of 24 hours, I was sitting in the office of one of the most powerful men in the country, being offered something I had only ever dreamed of. What's the catch? I finally asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. Elias leaned back against his desk, his piercing blue eyes locked onto mine. Why do you assume there's a catch? I scoffed. Because there's always a catch. His lips twitched. Smart girl. He crossed his arms over his broad chest, studying me as if he were deciding just how much to say. I don't do charity, Mia. Everything I invest in has a purpose, and I expect results. My stomach clenched. There it was, the unspoken cost. What kind of results? I asked warily. Elias's smirk deepened. I want you to sign with my label. I'll cover all your expenses, studio time, production, marketing, even personal living costs, until your career takes off. I let out a slow breath. And in return, you belong to my label. You work under my guidance. You don't make reckless decisions that could damage your career or my investment. His voice was cool, firm. In short, I make you a star. And in return, I make sure you don't throw it all away. I frowned. You think I'd throw it away? Elias's expression darkened for a split second, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. I've seen talented people destroy themselves because they weren't ready for what fame brings. Something about his tone sent a chill down my spine. There was weight behind his words, a story I wasn't privy to. I hesitated. This was huge. Signing meant I could finally escape the brutal cycle of survival. It meant no more sleeping in shelters, no more skipping meals just to afford another day of playing on the streets. But it also meant handing over a piece of myself to a man I barely knew. I exhaled sharply. I need time to think about it. Elias nodded, seemingly unbothered. Take your time, but don't take too long. Something about the way he said it sent a ripple of unease through me. Because men like Elias Lancaster didn't offer something twice. I clutched the contract as I stepped out of the towering skyscraper, the city air sharp against my skin. My heart was still pounding, my mind a chaotic mess. Was this real? For years, I had knocked on every door, begged for gigs, played in bars where people barely looked at me. And now, out of nowhere, a billionaire was offering me a chance at everything I'd ever wanted. It felt too good to be true. And if there was one thing life had taught me, it was that things that seemed too good to be true always came with a price. I didn't have anywhere to go, so I wandered. My feet carried me through the city, past neon-lit storefronts and crowded sidewalks, past places where I had once played for scraps. I thought about my mother, about the way she used to sing to me when I was little, her voice warm and rich, filling our tiny apartment with hope. She had always believed in me, but she had died before she could see me make it. What would she tell me to do? I barely noticed the man approaching until he was right in front of me. Well, if it isn't the little street rat. My stomach turned to ice. No, not now. Not him. Jason, my ex. The man who had once promised me the world, only to leave me broken and bleeding. His smirk was just as cruel as I remembered. Heard you've been getting cozy with some rich guy. Didn't take you long to start selling yourself to the highest bidder. My fist clenched. Go to hell, Jason. His eyes darkened. You still owe me. A sick feeling twisted in my gut. Jason had always been dangerous, but now, the way he loomed over me, the way his fingers twitched at his side, it sent every instinct screaming. Leave me alone, I said, stepping back. But Jason only grinned. Oh, sweetheart, we both know it's never that easy. And just like that, I knew. No matter how much I wanted to escape, my past wasn't done with me yet. Jason's smirk twisted into something darker as he stepped closer. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced myself to stay still. If I showed weakness, he'd use it against me, just like he always did. I don't owe you anything, I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. Jason let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. That's where you're wrong, sweetheart. You think I forgot about the money you took when you ran? I clenched my jaw. That wasn't your money, Jason. It was mine. His hand shot out so fast I barely had time to react. He grabbed my wrist, yanking me forward. I sucked in a sharp breath, refusing to let him see the fear clawing at my throat. You and I both know that's not how this works, he murmured, his grip tightening. You don't get to walk away from me, Mia. Not without paying what you owe. My mind raced. The money he was talking about. It wasn't even close to what he had taken from me over the years. But Jason didn't care about fairness. He cared about control. I forced my voice to stay calm. Let go, Jason. His grip tightened for just a second longer, his dark eyes searching mine, before he suddenly released me with a smirk. You're lucky I'm in a good mood, he said. But don't think this is over. With that, he turned and disappeared into the crowded street, leaving me standing there with my heart hammering against my ribs. I let out a shaky breath. No, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. By the time I made it back to my tiny room, my hands were still trembling. I sat on the edge of my mattress, staring at the contract Elias had given me. Jason wasn't going to go away. He never did. And if I stayed on these streets, he'd find me again. Elias's voice echoed in my head. Take your time, but don't take too long. I bit my lip, staring at the crisp pages in front of me. This deal, it could change my life. It could get me out of Jason's reach. It could finally give me a shot at something more. But it also meant stepping into Elias Lancaster's world, a world I knew nothing about. I exhaled sharply, then reached for a pen. I had no other choice. With a deep breath, I signed my name, and just like that, my life was no longer my own. The next morning, a sleek black car pulled up in front of my building. The driver, dressed in an immaculate suit, stepped out and opened the door for me without a word. I hesitated for only a second before sliding into the leather seats. Elias was waiting for me. He sat across from me, perfectly composed, his sharp blue eyes studying me like I was a puzzle he had just solved. You signed. I met his gaze. I did. A slow, knowing smirk spread across his lips. Good. Then let's get started. The black car moved smoothly through the city, the outside world blurring past like a distant memory. I sat stiffly, gripping my hands together to keep from fidgeting. Elias sat across from me, calm and unreadable, the leather seats framing him like he belonged in a throne. He didn't speak at first, just watched me with that piercing gaze that made my skin prickle. I was the first to break the silence. So what now? Elias tilted his head slightly. Now, you stop playing for scraps on the street and start learning what it means to be a professional musician. I scoffed. That easy, huh? He smiled, slow and sharp. Not easy, but possible. I shifted in my seat, not sure what to make of his confidence. So, what's the first step? Elias leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. First, we assess your skills. I've arranged a private session with one of the best producers in the industry. He'll determine what you need to improve, and we'll go from there. I swallowed hard. I wasn't used to anyone analyzing my talent like that. On the streets, I played whatever felt right. No rules. No expectations. Just music. What if I fail? I asked before I could stop myself. Elias's gaze didn't waver. Then you prove you deserve to be here. A shiver ran through me, but I forced myself to nod. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? The car pulled up in front of a sleek glass building. The sign above the entrance read LUX Records. I stepped out, my heart pounding. This wasn't just some back alley recording studio. This was where stars were made. Elias led me inside, his pace steady, confident. People in sharp suits and designer outfits moved through the halls like they belonged. I felt their eyes flick toward me, some curious, some judgmental. We stopped in front of a door marked Studio. Elias pushed it open without hesitation. Inside, a man sat at a massive mixing board, adjusting levels with practiced ease. He was middle-aged, bald, with sharp brown eyes that immediately locked onto me. Elias gestured toward him. Mia, meet Daniel Crane. My stomach dropped. I knew that name. Everyone in the industry knew that name. Daniel Crane had produced some of the biggest artists in the world. And now, he was staring at me like I was an unexpected guest at a private dinner party. Elias spoke smoothly. Daniel, this is Mia. She'll be working with us. Daniel arched an eyebrow, then leaned back in his chair. You got guts, kid. I'll give you that. I swallow hard. Play something. Daniel interrupted, waving a hand toward the guitar stand in the corner. I hesitated. My own guitar was broken, but I wasn't about to back out now. I grabbed one of the studio guitars, adjusting the strap over my shoulder. My fingers found the chords, and before I could second-guess myself, I played. The moment the first notes filled the room, I forgot about the pressure, the expectations. It was just me and the music. My voice wove through the chords, raw and unpolished, but real. When I finished, silence stretched between us. Daniel finally let out a low whistle. Well, you're rough around the edges. But there's something there. Elias smirked. I thought so. Daniel eyed me again. All right, kid. Let's see what we can do with you. And just like that, my trial by fire began. The next few weeks were brutal. Daniel didn't hold back. Every note I sang, every chord I played, he picked apart, analyzing my weaknesses with surgical precision. You're relying too much on emotion, he said one afternoon, after making me repeat the same song 5 times. It's good, but if you don't control it, it'll control you. I wiped the sweat from my forehead. I thought music was supposed to be emotional. Daniel's gaze was sharp. Emotion is good, but if you don't learn technique, you'll burn out before you even make it. I groaned, but I listened, because he was right. Meanwhile, Elias watched from the sidelines, silent but ever present. He didn't interfere. He didn't encourage. He simply observed, like he was waiting to see what I would become. Late one night, after an exhausting session, I found myself sitting on the studio floor, my body aching. Elias crouched beside me, his sharp blue eyes scanning my face. Tired, I let out a breathless laugh. That obvious. His lips quirked. Good. That means you're doing it right. I met his gaze, searching for some kind of answer. Why are you doing this, Elias? Really? For a moment, his expression softened. Because I know what it's like to claw your way out of the dark. And because I think you can do it too. Something about his words settled deep in my chest, pressing against old wounds I hadn't realized were still open. I didn't know what to say. So instead, I nodded. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I had a chance. The days blurred into weeks, and every waking moment was consumed by music. Daniel was relentless, and Elias was an ever-present shadow, watching, waiting. I could feel the shift in myself, the rawness of my voice being honed into something sharper, more precise. But with progress came exhaustion. My body ached, my voice was hoarse, and sleep felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. One night, after a particularly grueling session, I stumbled into the small apartment Elias had arranged for me. It was nothing like the cramped shelters or run-down motels I'd called home before. It was clean, warm, safe, but no place could ever erase the ghost that followed me. I had just collapsed onto the couch when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello. Silence. Then, did you really think I'd let you go that easily? Jason. My breath hitched. My fingers curled around the phone, knuckles turning white. You signed your little deal. His voice was smooth, taunting. Bet you think you're finally free. I forced my voice to stay calm. What do you want, Jason? A low chuckle. You know exactly what I want. You still owe me, sweetheart. And I always collect. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering in my ears. I don't owe you anything. Jason clicked his tongue. Oh, but you do. And if you think some rich guy can protect you forever, you're wrong. I'll be seeing you real soon, Mia. The line went dead. A shudder ran through me, my grip on the phone tightening. Jason never made empty threats. I was running out of time. The next morning, I walked into the studio with shadows under my eyes. I tried to shake off the conversation with Jason, but it clung to me like a stain I couldn't scrub away. Elias noticed immediately. He didn't say anything at first, but after our session ended, he pulled me aside. You look like hell, he said bluntly. I scoffed. Thanks. Just what I needed to hear. His expression remained unreadable. What's wrong? I hesitated. Could I trust him? Elias was powerful, but Jason was dangerous in a way that money couldn't always fix. Nothing, I said finally. Just tired. Elias didn't believe me. I could see in his eyes. But instead of pressing, he nodded. If you ever need something, you tell me. There was something in his tone, something firm, unyielding. It wasn't just an offer. It was a warning. And for the first time, I wondered just how far Elias Lancaster would go to protect his investment. Jason wasn't bluffing. A week later, I found a note slipped under my door. Meet me at the Raven at midnight. I started digging into your new life. I felt sick. The Raven was a bar on the outskirts of town. The kind of place where bad things happen to good people. I should have ignored it. Should have gone to Elias, told him everything. But Jason had a way of getting what he wanted. And if I didn't face him, he'd find another way to ruin me. So, at 11:50 p.m., I slipped out of my apartment and headed into the dark. The bar was exactly how I remembered, dimly lit, filled with smoke and the scent of spilled liquor. My stomach twisted as I spotted Jason at a back table, lazily twirling a glass between his fingers. I clenched my fists and walked over. I'm here. Say what you need to say and let me go. Jason looked up, his smirk slow and predatory. Sit down, sweetheart. I didn't move. His eyes darkened. That wasn't a request. Reluctantly, I slid into the seat across from him, my entire body coiled tight. Jason leaned in, his voice a low murmur. I have friends, Mia. Powerful ones. The kind who wouldn't mind making life a little harder for you. My stomach churned. What do you want? Jason smirked. 10 grand. Cash. I barked out a bitter laugh. You really think I have that kind of money? He leaned back, stretching his arms. No, what your new sugar daddy does. I stiffened. Elias isn't. Jason waved a hand. Save it. I don't care what he is. What I do care about is getting what I'm owed. My breath came fast and shallow. You're insane. Jason's smirk disappeared. No, sweetheart. I'm patient. But that patience is running out. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times before turning it to face me. My blood ran cold. It was a picture of me, taken just last night. Someone had been following me. Jason grinned. Like I said, I always collect. My pulse thundered in my ears. Jason had crossed lines before, but this was something else. I needed to get out of here. I shot up from my seat. We're done. Jason just chuckled. We'll see about that. I turned and stormed out of the bar, my hands shaking. This wasn't over. Not even close. By the time I got back to my apartment, my nerves were shot. I barely had time to process what had happened before a knock sounded at my door. I froze. Another knock, harder this time. I reached for the nearest object, a lamp, and cautiously stepped forward. Who is it? A familiar voice came through the door. Open the door, Mia. Elias. I exhaled sharply and unlocked it. Elias stepped inside, his usual composure barely holding together. He was angry. Really, truly angry. His eyes raked over me. Where were you? I hesitated. Don't lie to me. His voice was sharp cold. Who did you meet? I swallowed hard. It's none of your business. His jaw clenched. Everything about you is my business now. Something in his tone made me shiver. I looked away. It was Jason. Elias went still. Then, in a voice so quiet it sent chills down my spine, he asked, what did he want? I hesitated. Money. Elias let out a slow, measured breath. And what did he threaten you with? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Elias Lancaster was a man who thrived in control. But right now, he looked ready to burn the entire city down. His next words were a promise. A warning. A declaration. Jason just made the biggest mistake of his life. And for the first time, I truly understood Elias Lancaster was far more dangerous than Jason could ever be. The room felt suffocating. Elias stood there, his body stiff, his hands curled into fists like he was barely containing the rage simmering beneath his skin. I had seen Jason angry. I had seen men lose their tempers. But Elias's fury was different. It was quiet, controlled. The kind of anger that didn't lash out blindly. It calculated, waited, then destroyed. I shifted uncomfortably. Elias, don't. His gaze snapped to me, sharp as a blade. Don't what, Mia? I swallowed hard. Don't get involved. A slow, humorless smile spread across his face. Too late. He turned and walked to the window, staring out at the glittering cityscape. His voice was calm, measured. I don't tolerate threats. I crossed my arms, frustration bubbling inside me. I can handle this. Elias turned back to me, his expression unreadable. No, you can't. I bristled. You don't know what I'm capable of. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. And you don't know who you just signed a contract with. I froze. His voice was low, edged with something dangerous. Jason made the mistake of thinking you're alone. But you're not. Not anymore. My breath hitched. Elias. He tilted his head, studying me like he was trying to decide how much to tell me. Let me handle this. I hesitated. I had spent my entire life fighting my own battles. Letting someone else take control felt unnatural. But Jason had never been this bold before. He had always relied on manipulation, on psychological warfare. This was different. This was a warning. And Elias Lancaster didn't take kindly to warnings. I finally nodded, a slow and cautious agreement. Elias's smirk returned, but there was nothing amused about it. Good girl. I didn't hear from Jason for 2 days. I didn't see Elias much either. He was gone, handling things in a way I wasn't privy to. But I could feel the shift, the tension in the air. Something was happening. On the third night, I received a text from an unknown number. Call off your attack dog, Mia. You don't want this war. I stared at the message, my heart racing. Jason had never sounded afraid before. I debated whether to respond, but before I could, my phone rang. Elias. I answered. What did you do? Elias's voice was smooth, unaffected. I had a conversation. My stomach twisted. With who? A pause. Then, Jason won't be bothering you again. I exhaled sharply. Elias, You don't need to know the details, he interrupted, his tone final. Just focus on your career. I gripped the phone tighter. What if he comes back? Elias's voice dropped to something lethal. He won't. A shiver ran down my spine. I didn't know what Elias had done, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. A week passed. Jason disappeared. No messages, no calls, nothing. For the first time in years, I didn't have to look over my shoulder. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt something else. Unease. Elias had fixed my problem. But at what cost? I was no fool. I knew powerful men didn't operate without leverage. And Elias Lancaster had just invested in me. I was no longer just a broke street musician. I belonged to his world now. I saw the way people looked at me when I walked into the studio. The whispers. The questions. Who was the girl Elias Lancaster had personally brought in? It wasn't just about my talent anymore. It was about the power tied to my name. And power, I was learning, was just another kind of debt. Elias was waiting for me when I arrived at the studio that morning. He leaned against the doorway, his piercing blue eyes scanning me. You're handling this well, he said casually. I crossed my arms. I don't know what this is. He smirked. Good. Keep it that way. I narrowed my eyes. Are you going to tell me what you did to Jason? Elias took a step closer. No. Frustration bubbled up. You can't just make people disappear, Elias. He studied me for a long moment. You don't understand how this world works yet, Mia. But you will. I let out a breath. What if I don't want to? Elias's smirk was knowing. Then you shouldn't have signed that contract. I hated that he was right. But deep down, I knew. I was in too deep to turn back now. A month passed. My first single was set for release. The industry buzzed with speculation. Who was this mysterious new artist Elias Lancaster had taken under his wing? The pressure was suffocating, but I thrived in it. For the first time, I had more than just survival. I had a future. One night, as I sat alone in my apartment, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Elias. Meet me. We need to talk. I exhaled. Another storm was coming. But this time I wasn't running. This time I was ready. The end, or just the beginning.